She had the world at her fingertips.
She was very outgoing, very fearless. She was just a smart young lady.
The sky was the limit.
And it looked like she'd found the love of her life, too.
She introduced him to the family.
She was taken with this guy. She loved him.
Until tragedy stole her too soon.
Blood was coming out her mouth.
911, do you need police?
Just a roller coaster of emotions surged through my body.
Detectives moved quickly to identify a suspect.
The name came from another resident that did not want to be identified.
He wanted something more than friendship.
And the killer's explanation would be full of excuses.
He said he woke up in a haze.
The drugs made him go crazy.
But were they also enough for him to get away with murder?
It was a slap in the face.
It'll never be okay. He knew exactly what he was doing.
We're just friends.
October 2nd, 2015. It's Friday night in Charlotte, North Carolina, a thriving metropolis of more than 2 million.
Charlotte, North Carolina is a really big city and it's growing every day.
It's a great town. It has a growing financial sector, which is really driving a lot of people to the area.
Although, like any city, parts of Charlotte still struggle.
Some of the city's challenges are definitely crime, and education is another one of those real serious issues.
The city's growth had also made safe, affordable housing very hard to find.
It's 9:30 that night when Brittany Mayfield returns to the apartment where she lives with her daughter and sister.
The apartment was in a new complex built by the local housing authority.
The neighborhood, for the most part, was a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood.
Lexi is Brittany's little sister, 23-year-old Alexia Mayfield.
Alexia had recently moved into the apartment with her sister. While the sister went to work, she would watch the child.
I called maybe an hour before I got off. She didn't answer the phone, so I thought maybe, of course, she probably asleep.
Inside, Brittany finds her daughter in the living room.
Brittany's baby was peacefully asleep.
Lexi?
Then, careful not to wake the baby, Brittany heads back to her sister's bedroom.
Lexi.
She found her sister on the floor.
She see blood coming from Lexi's mouth. She tapped her. She wasn't moving, but her body wasn't cold. It was warm.
In a panic, Brittany calls 911 in hopes they can save her sister. But will it be too late? Outgoing 23-year-old Alexia Mayfield was always the center of attention.
People gravitated toward her. I was a quiet one. Lexi was the outgoing one, always loud, laughing, goofy.
Alexia was the life of the party. You never had a dull moment being around her. She's very bright, smart, funny.
She was very fearless. She spoke her mind. Even though I'm the oldest, Lexi was more like the backbone, really.
After graduating high school in 2010, Alexia enrolled in an online college with the goal of becoming a pharmacy technician.
That's what she wanted to hone in on. And so we would go to the different places like CVS and see what their availabilities were. And she talked about it all the time. She was real excited.
Alexia was very ambitious and driven.
She wanted to make something of herself. That was her main goal. School was her number one priority.
She was just a smart young lady. She loved learning.
With Lexi, the sky was the limit.
But no matter how high she soared, Lexi stayed close to her sister, Brittany. In 2014, the sisters moved in together, renting an apartment near the Charlotte airport.
Brittany was about to have a baby, and Alexia was looking forward to being a new aunt.
Lexi loved her niece very much, and her niece loved her.
However, a budding career and a new address weren't the only changes on the horizon for Lexi.
Hey, beautiful.
You talking to me?
What's up?
She told me that she was just walking down the street close to where she and her sister lived at the time. He pulled up beside her.
He was 25-year-old Emmanuel Felton.
There was definitely a spark there. They had a great conversation, and you could see that it was going to lead to something else.
She came back saying, I met this dude. So the relationship started from that point. He seemed to really love her, and she loved him, and she made that so clear. She made it so clear how she felt about Emmanuel.
She said, I have somebody that loves me just as much as I love him.
Before long, the couple was starting to think about taking the next step.
Emmanuel called me one afternoon, and he laid out this plan of how he was going to ask Alexia to marry him. Talked about the ring, the whole 9 yards.
But the big proposal never happened.
She just kept saying things just not sitting right. She felt like this wasn't the right relationship.
Alexia decided to break things off with the intentions that they could remain friends. Emmanuel agreed.
After the breakup, Alexia threw herself back into her studies, with no intention of dating again so soon. But fate had other plans.
Alexia had a friend named Jaden that she had known years before she even met Emmanuel.
Around the time things had fizzled with Emmanuel, Alexia and Jaden Young had reconnected.
He was smart. He was funny. He was the kind of guy that everybody enjoyed being around.
He was like Alexia in that he never met a stranger. And they seemed to have a lot of fun together.
And with Alexia almost finished with school, some hoped there might still be a big engagement in her future.
He left a great impression on everyone.
I was really taken by him. I loved him as though he were the son that I never had.
But now Alexia's future hangs in the balance.
Her sister has just found her unconscious and unresponsive inside of her apartment.
911, if he's not getting up to not moving.
She was covered in blood.
I remember Brittany telling me that she thought maybe she had fell and hit her head.
But when EMTs arrive on the scene, there's nothing they can do for Alexia.
Alexia was pronounced deceased at that time.
And it's quickly clear that her death is no accident.
First responders make a shocking discovery. Alexia has been shot.
She had sustained at least 2 gunshot wounds.
She had been murdered.
No.
"23-year-old Alexia Mayfield was on the verge of great things.
Alexia was looking forward to graduating with her pharmacy technician certification.
She also had a promising new relationship with a guy named Jaden Young.
The future appeared bright for Alexia.
But now, after Alexia's sister found her collapsed on the floor inside their apartment, EMTs have just pronounced her dead from at least 2 gunshot wounds.
Her body was found face down, so her sister could not tell that there were bullet wounds initially.
Never did she assume when she first came in the house, like, oh, my sister's dead.
When detectives arrive on the scene, they immediately begin to process the evidence.
We located 2 380 caliber shell casings in the bedroom beside the victim.
There was no weapon at the scene, so that led the police to rule out suicide.
But why had this young woman ended up dead? Given the area, detectives first consider the possibility that this was a random crime.
While the city is growing, and that's great for the economy, an increase in population can also lead to an increase in the crime rate.
Crime is definitely on the rise. Violent crime is on the rise.
And Alexia's neighborhood was no exception.
This could have been a robbery gone wrong.
However, a look around the scene quickly rules out that theory.
There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was missing.
They found a tablet and a set of keys in Alexia's bedroom, so it didn't look like the killer had tried to take anything.
Instead, evidence at the crime scene suggests that whoever killed Alexia wasn't an intruder.
Detectives found a pizza box on the kitchen table, along with 2 half-empty glasses,
There was an empty bottle of bourbon.
which let the police officers know that there was someone else who had been in the apartment that evening, someone who Alexia knew.
Hoping that she might know who that someone was, detectives turned to Alexia's sister, Brittany.
Brittany was waiting outside while EMTs checked out her daughter. Even though she appeared to be unharmed, they wanted to be sure before releasing her.
We know this is hard, but we really need your help if we're going to be able to find out who did this.
I'll try. Brittany lost not only just her sister, but also her best friend.
Detectives begin by asking Brittany when she had last spoken to her sister.
I spoke to Alexia a couple times earlier when I was at work.
We talked periodically throughout the day. I would call and check up on her and my baby, see what they were doing.
Hey, what's up, girl? Hey, Lexi. Did she eat yet? Yeah, she had a good dinner. She's in the packing plate now, getting sleepy.
Lexi sound normal, sound happy.
But Brittany says that around 8 o'clock, Alexia stopped responding.
The phone just keep going straight to voicemail. She kept saying, that's not like her because she got my baby. I don't know what's going on, but I'm kind of worried. And then she was like, maybe I'm just worried for nothing.
I thought maybe she was just asleep.
When she first went in the house, she was like, girl, wake up.
But Alexia wasn't asleep.
No.
That's when she came to reality, like something else has happened.
Now it's up to detectives to determine exactly what that was.
We know this is very hard for you, ma'am. Is it a possibility that your sister may have gotten mixed up with some kind of trouble?
No, she was never in the streets or anything like that.
It wasn't like it was her past or her situation caught up with her.
Brittany also doesn't know for certain who could have come over that night.
Alexia didn't tell her she was expecting company.
However, Brittany does give detectives one possibility.
Alexia had recently started dating a gentleman named Jaden.
Were there any kind of problems between them that you're aware of?
No, sir.
He was very gentle with Alexia. He showed her nothing but respect.
Are there any ex-boyfriends we may need to talk to?
Well, there's Emmanuel.
Brittany gave us some backstory of that relationship, that the victim had recently broken up with Emmanuel.
Was there any bad blood between them?
I don't think so. I mean, they still hung out from time to time.
Emmanuel seemed to be okay with the breakup, and they seemed to be on good terms.
As far as the relationship being rocky, I didn't feel like that's what it was at all.
Thank you very much. We'll be in touch.
Brittany's statement doesn't give detectives much to go on, and neither does a canvass of the neighbors in Brittany's building.
We talked to a couple neighbors who earlier in the evening had heard a disturbance of some type coming from the apartment. They weren't sure what it was, but they did not call police.
But just when it looks like they're at a dead end, one of the building's security guards approaches detectives with what appears to be an important tip.
That security officer approached and gave us a name.
He says that the detective should check out a guy named Mark Briggs.
He said that name came from another resident that did not want to be identified.
They wanted to remain anonymous, so they didn't want to talk to the officers directly.
And according to the security guard, the neighbor had a good reason to remain anonymous.
Apparently, Mark Briggs was a dangerous criminal.
A security guard at the crime scene has just come forward and given detectives the name of a possible suspect in Alexia Mayfield's murder, a man named Mark Briggs.
The guard said that he had gotten the name from a resident of the apartment complex who had wanted to remain anonymous.
They didn't want to give us any information, didn't want to talk to us, but had provided that name to the security officer.
According to the informant, Mark Briggs was another resident of the complex who apparently had a thing for Alexia.
The informant had also suggested that Mark was dangerous.
When detectives head back to the station and run Mark's name through their database, it appears that there may be something to the tip.
It turned out that he had a fairly extensive criminal record.
Most are petty theft and drug charges, but others raise red flags for detectives.
Mark has several domestic battery charges on his record.
There's also firearms violations.
When detectives bring Mark into the station first thing the next morning, he appears distraught about Alexia's death.
We assume that you're aware that Alexia Mayfield was murdered last night.
Everybody's talking about it. Can't believe that she's really gone.
Yeah, we heard you had a thing for her.
I guess you'd call it that.
He admits that they had become friends and that he wanted something a little bit more than friendship with her.
She was so pretty. She was always so nice.
But you guys never...
Nah.
Did you ask her out after she broke up with Emmanuel?
Yeah. She was seeing some other guy.
He realized that Alexia just wasn't into him like that. He backed off, and they remained friends.
But detectives wonder, how did Mark take getting turned down a second time?
So did that make you feel some type of way, seeing her with someone else?
I'm sorry.
Mark says he was okay being friends.
Although detectives wonder if they were still friends, maybe it was Mark who'd spent the evening with Alexia shortly before her murder.
Maybe he'd tried to make a move and things got out of hand.
When's the last time you saw Alexia?
Yesterday.
He said they had met up earlier that afternoon for coffee just to catch up.
At any point yesterday were you in her apartment?
No. Do y'all think I had something to do with this? Listen. If y'all really want to know what happened to Alexia, I need to go question her new guy, Jaden.
Why is that?
He says that Alexia had been complaining about her relationship, that Jaden had become more controlling and more jealous.
Jealous enough that he'd followed her?
Maybe he was angry about Alexia hanging out with Mark and had confronted her about it.
Or was it possible Mark was making the whole thing up?
He could just be trying to throw them off of his tracks.
However, when police ask Mark where he was the previous night, he has an alibi ready.
Mark says that he went out to dinner with some friends and later on they went to a club.
Detectives will need to follow up on Mark's alibi. But first, they contact Alexia's new boyfriend, Jaden Young.
They figure it's about time to bring Jaden in for questioning too.
Since he was involved with Alexia at the time, they needed to rule him out.
So when did you find out that Alexia had been killed?
Last night. Her mother called me and I came straight over.
When Alexia was shot and killed, I was over to the apartment and Jaden walked in. And he felt his knees. And he said, "Mama, I'm so sorry." He said, "Mama, I'm so sorry." His sentiment and his sincerity taught me so much.
But was it guilt or grief that evoked such a strong response to Alexia's death?
Do you know a guy named Mark Briggs?
Yeah. Yeah, he lives over there near Alexia.
You know, she met him for coffee yesterday afternoon, right?
Yeah, she might have mentioned it.
He never really sweated it because her and Mark were just friends.
He also claimed that things weren't all that serious between him and Lexi.
He said they had talked about stepping it up eventually once Alexia got out of school, but they just weren't really there yet.
Alexia was a diehard student. She wanted to get her education.
You own a gun, Jaden?
No, sir.
Where were you at last night?
I was working. At least until Lexi's mother called me.
He said he was here service.
When detectives follow up with the rideshare service, their records confirm Jaden's alibi.
It appears that he was busy downtown and on the opposite side of Charlotte all evening.
But while Jaden's alibi checks out, when detectives speak to Mark's friends, what they learn puts him back on the suspect list.
It seems that he met up with his friends for dinner around 6:30. They left the restaurant around 8:30, and they didn't meet back up at the club until about 10:30. So that gives about an hour and a half window where Mark could have committed the crime.
He was definitely a person of interest.
After his alibi falls apart, detectives consider Alexia Mayfield's friend and neighbor, Mark Briggs, a possible suspect in her murder.
Not only did he have a violent history, he admitted that he had feelings for Alexia.
Maybe Mark had been pressing for something more, and maybe he got angry when Alexia rejected him.
Since detectives couldn't account for his location for more than an hour around the time of the murder, he definitely could have had the opportunity to kill her.
But after detectives dig deeper, Mark's window of opportunity appears to close.
When detectives subpoena Mark's phone records for that evening to see whether he was in the vicinity of Alexia's apartment, it shows that he was pretty much in downtown Charlotte the entire night of the murder.
There was no indication that he had called or texted Alexia at any point that evening asking to come over.
It's not enough to rule him out completely, but it does suggest that he wasn't Alexia's killer.
However, a review of Alexia's phone records does reveal that she had been in contact with someone else prior to her death.
It seems as though she received several text messages in the hours leading up to the murder.
Detectives trace the number back to Alexia's former boyfriend, Emmanuel Felton.
He was going to be bringing some items over, returning them to her. One of those items being a tablet-style computer, also some keys. Those items were found in the apartment.
That's not the only indication that Emmanuel had come by either.
There was a text message that said that he was here, and we took that to mean that he was at the apartments.
When detectives run a background check on Emmanuel, there's no history of domestic violence.
They don't find anything other than a couple of minor possession charges.
However, they do find something that raises a red flag.
He had, in 2013, applied for a concealed handgun permit.
His application was denied, but the reason it was denied really raised some concerns.
He indicated that he had sought or received mental health treatment, but he would not sign a HIPAA release in order to obtain mental health records.
Detectives needed to find out what kind of mental health issues Emmanuel had been dealing with, and if they played any role in Alexia's death.
Detectives are wondering if he managed to get his hands on a gun despite his denial for a gun permit.
The next question is, why would Emmanuel have wanted to harm Alexia? Detectives learn more about the couple's relationship when they speak to her close friend, Constance Williams.
We was more like sisters. She would confide in me.
Yes.
Constance tells detectives that Alexia had seemed happy with Emmanuel. At first.
Lexi did love him. She introduced him to the family.
However, Constance also says that as the relationship progressed, friends and family saw less and less of Lexi.
She wasn't coming around as much. She would start taking the back seat more like, oh, girl, I can't. Oh, maybe next time. This wasn't the Lexi that I know. So I kept saying and asking her, like, Lexi, are you okay?
Constance says Lexi had eventually confessed that things with Emmanuel weren't going well.
Alexia shared that Emmanuel was very controlling and jealous, and he did not want her hanging out with any of her old friends.
She would confide in me like, girl, I'm just aggravated. I'm frustrated with this relationship.
But she also had a hard time walking away.
Alexia really loved Emmanuel.
Lexi kept saying she wanted to get out this relationship. Then next thing you know, she'd be like, oh, well, we're back on good terms. We're back together. Everything is okay.
However, the relationship continued to spiral out of control.
Emmanuel's behavior became increasingly irrational.
He would become agitated, kind of irrational.
Emmanuel even accused her of cheating on him, which Alexia vehemently denied.
She felt like something was wrong with him. She just couldn't put her hands on it. She just kept saying he was kind of crazy.
According to Constance, Alexia never uncovered anything about Emmanuel's apparent struggles with mental illness, but she did learn something disturbing.
Alexia found out that Emmanuel had started using drugs.
She was like, when he's not on it, he's so nice, he's so sweet. But when he is on it, it was more of the bad than the good.
His substance abuse definitely contributed to his erratic behaviors and controlling ways.
Worst of all, Constance says that Emmanuel's drug use made him violent.
She confided in me that he was being abusive. And I know of 3 instances where he has physically abused her.
But after a year of dating, Alexia finally had enough.
Alexia really couldn't take the emotional roller coaster anymore.
She was like, I'm finally leaving him, girl.
Constance says that Emmanuel appeared to take the breakup surprisingly well.
Basically, Emmanuel was on his best behavior, just like he was anytime she had threatened to leave him in the past.
She was like, even though they were splitting, they were still going to be on good terms. And I just think things is looking up for the better.
Especially once Alexia reconnected with Jaden.
Lexi did not stay put. She didn't just sit there. She didn't just wait for him to come back around again. She would go and do her own thing.
And now detectives suspect that Lexi moving on was Emmanuel's motive for murder.
It was just basically jealous.
He chose to do the unthinkable.
It was just, if I can't have you, nobody else can.
We're not together.
Detectives trying to solve Alexia Mayfield's murder have reason to suspect the killer is her ex-boyfriend, 25-year-old Emmanuel Felton.
It's obvious from the phone records and text messages that he had been in communication with Alexia that evening and possibly was at the apartment.
One of Alexia's friends had also reached out to detectives with information about Emmanuel's past abuse.
I've seen hands-on physical abuse, emotional abuse. She kept telling me, girl, he's getting so controlling too. It's beyond bearable.
During the breakup, he had come to the apartment, he had returned the items, and something had happened after that point. He was the sole suspect.
But now that detectives have a prime suspect, they have to find him.
We began collecting information on Emmanuel Felton, finding out where he lives, his background information, where he might be.
Next, detectives subpoena Emmanuel's cell phone records, which reveal his whereabouts on the night of the murder.
We obtained his cell phone records showing that he was at the scene when the incident happened.
Detectives have less luck tracking down Emmanuel's current location.
It looked like he might have turned his phone off after the murder because they weren't able to track him anymore.
It took him a little while to find Emmanuel. It took him a while.
In the end, it's a relative that gives up Emmanuel's location.
We get a phone call to 911 from a gentleman who says his cousin has come to his apartment. He's very upset, and he thinks that he's wanted for a homicide that had occurred.
The man said that he was Emmanuel Felton's cousin.
Within minutes, police arrive at the cousin's address.
Given that Emmanuel was possibly armed and apparently in a fragile mental state, it wouldn't have been hard for things to go wrong.
Police are aware that sometimes suspects set themselves up for a suicide by cop situation. So law enforcement was concerned that that might be what was happening here.
But when they find Emmanuel huddled on the floor, it's obvious he's not looking for a fight.
He's sitting on the apartment floor, back against the wall, knees up, kind of head down in his hands. He's very upset, kind of spaced out.
Hey, Emmanuel.
I just sit down, start having a conversation with him. And ultimately, he says he will come to the law enforcement center and let us conduct an interview.
Emmanuel gave up without any resistance. He went along peacefully.
Emmanuel remains cooperative once down at the station and inside the interview room.
Part of the interview was just kind of getting a rapport with him, getting him talking. We talked about a lot of things, his history, where he's from, things he wanted to do with his life, and then began to talk to him more about having issues with the victim, Alexia.
Hey, I love that girl. She was never faithful.
He was obsessed with the fact that she was cheating on him. There's no evidence to say that, but in his mind, he thought she was cheating on him. And he would confront her about that, and she would say, "Oh, you're crazy. I'm not doing anything." His big thing was he didn't like being called crazy. And that would essentially set him off.
Despite that, Emmanuel claims that on the night of the murder, he'd gone over to the apartment, hoping to patch things up with Alexia once more.
He wanted to bring the personal items that he kept after they broke up. He said he also brought her several gifts to apologize for how he had been behaving.
I'm sorry I got so angry.
I appreciate that.
They were having a good time, eating some pizza and drinking a little bourbon.
But at some point, things took a deadly turn.
Most likely, Emmanuel suggested they get back together, or he might have even tried to make a move on Alexia.
No, Emmanuel, no.
The conversation became heated. He became angry.
I felt like he knew that this time it was over.
So what happened, man?
I don't know.
His whole story was that he blacked out. He doesn't remember.
Are you serious? No, we're not together.
What are you talking about?
According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, more than 51 million Americans struggled with mental health problems in 2019. While only 4% of violent crimes in the U.S. can be attributed to people with mental illness, 37% of incarcerated adults have been diagnosed with a mental health condition. Emmanuel Felton has surrendered to detectives investigating the murder of his ex, 23-year-old Alexia Mayfield.
Officers begin to question him, and Emmanuel admits that he went over to Alexia's apartment that night.
He was, quote unquote, dropping her clothes off. That's how he got access to the apartment.
However, Emmanuel claims not to know how Alexia died.
His whole thing was that he didn't remember what happened. He had blacked out. He wasn't sure he had done anything to anyone, that he had hurt anyone.
You don't remember shooting Alexia?
I was messed up.
He was saying he didn't remember because he was hazed because of drugs.
Emmanuel tells police that he had been on a 7-day drug binge prior to the murder.
You shot her, Emmanuel, twice.
She's dead because of you.
Oh, God.
He breaks down crying, saying that he never meant to hurt her. It's just that the drugs made him go crazy.
He ultimately admitted that he remembered firing one shot that struck Alexia and then left the apartment. He said he woke up in a haze driving his car. He had a gun on him and he threw it out the window.
Emmanuel's confession is more than enough for detectives to file charges, even if they don't believe much of it.
I believe he entirely knew what he was doing and what had happened. At the conclusion of the interview, he was charged with first-degree murder.
When friends and family learn of Emmanuel's arrest, they agree with the detective's suspicion that Emmanuel's blackout story is a lie.
There's no doubt in my mind. Emmanuel Felton came to the house that night with the intentions on killing her, because he normally doesn't carry a gun on him. He got the gun from somebody. He was like, if I can't have you, can nobody else have you?
Many women who try to flee and leave in volatile and violent situations of domestic violence end up dying. The statistics are astounding. It's an astronomical amount of people.
Still, family and friends are glad Alexia's killer is in custody.
It was relief. We were grateful. We were happy, but we were still sad at the same time. Just because he's arrested, that doesn't bring Lexi back.
I was relieved, but I really wanted to go and talk to him so that I could understand how this man who said he loved my daughter so much could do something so dastardly, something so cowardly. How could he have done such a thing?
The only thing that I still want to know is why. Why?
But in the end, Alexia's family will never get the answers they deserve.
With his trial approaching, Emmanuel's attorneys approached prosecutors about a possible plea deal.
Emmanuel's attorney pushes the drug binge theory to argue for a more lenient sentence.
He was on a 7-day binge from what they said, but I really think he said that to make his story sound more sympathetic.
Before the trial is set to begin, the defense and prosecutors make a deal.
He ultimately took a plea deal and pled to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 16 years in prison.
And I thought 16 years, why? And the lawyer had explained because Emmanuel was dealing from a diminished capacity because he'd spent so much time doing drugs. If he had gone to court, if there was a trial, there would have been a possibility that he could get less time. And of course, nobody wanted that.
Not that everyone finds the outcome satisfying.
16 years is not long enough.
16 years for the cold-blooded murder of a young lady who had nothing but a bright future ahead of her, to me, does not seem fair. I would have argued for a much longer sentence, a much stricter, harsher sentence.
Emmanuel all but got away with murder.
And he will eventually get a second chance at life that Alexia never will.
Emmanuel Felton get to hear his family every day, get to talk to his family, get to see his family. We don't get that from Lexi.
I will never see my daughter on this side.
We would never get to hear Lexi's voice in person. We would never get to see Lexi face to face. That was robbed from us.
But Alexia's mother has made it her mission to ensure that her daughter didn't die in vain.
I've helped different people coordinate domestic violence conferences. And I'm in the process of doing that now. And if I were to share one thing concerning domestic violence, concerning volatile relationships, it would simply be to say, it's okay to love somebody, but never love anybody more than you love yourself. Never do that.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
Shot. I'm looking at the album. Have faith. Faith doesn't balance a ledger, Bill. Tresh replied. He resigned that week. In his letter, he used the word fraud 4 times. He expected the board to react. He expected a scandal. Instead, there was silence. The machine kept grinding. The salesman kept visiting nursing homes. And Bill Kratz kept singing hymns. Book 2, The Deadly Practice. Chapter 4, The Doctor with the Golden Touch. In Chicago, the air was thicker, smelling of exhaust and Lake Michigan salt. Dr. Ronald Michaels was a man who understood the value of a first impression. He was a podiatrist, but to his patients, he was a friend. He didn't just clip toenails or treat bunions. He brought sandwiches. He drank tea with 80-year-old widows in their cramped apartments. He listened to their stories about grandchildren and old wars. You're a saint, doctor, one patient told him as he finished a routine checkup. Michael smiled, a warm, practiced expression. I just care about your mobility, Mrs. Gable. At your age, your feet are your freedom. But when Michaels returned to his office, the saint vanished. He sat at his computer, his fingers flying over the keys as he entered billing codes for Medicare. On the screen, Mrs. Gable hadn't just had her nails trimmed. She had undergone 3 complex foot surgeries. According to Michael's records, he was performing hundreds of surgeries a month. Sometimes he billed for 5 surgeries on the same patient in a single week. It was impossible. It was glaring fraud, as investigators would later call it. But to the Medicare system, it was just another set of digital entries. By 1998, Michaels was the highest paid podiatrist in Illinois. He was pulling in over $400,000 a year. He had the big house in Lincolnwood, the luxury cars, the status. But greed is a hungry beast. The more it eats, the more it needs. And Maiko's was starting to starve. Chapter 5, The Star Witness. Joyce Brannon was 54 years old, a former ICU nurse who had seen the best and worst of humanity. She lived in the basement of the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church, where she worked as a caretaker. It was a humble life, but it was an honest one. She was one of Maiko's patients. For months, she had noticed the explanation of benefits forms from Medicare arriving in her mail. She was a nurse. She knew how to read them. 70 surgeries. She whispered, looking at a recent statement. I haven't had a single incision. When investigators Pete Tyler and Renee Reyes knocked on her door in September 2001, Joyce didn't hesitate. Honey, I know what a foot surgery is, she told Renee, her voice firm. I've spent half my life in operating rooms. Dr. Maikos hasn't done anything to me but trim my nails. He's stealing from the government, and he's using my name to do it. She was the perfect witness. She was alert, professional, and incorruptible. But Maikos knew she was talking. He had been tracking the investigation with the precision of a hunter. He had a Palm Pilot filled with notes on every patient the feds had visited. Next to Joyce Brannon's name, he had written, interview went poorly. The walls were closing in. Maiko's Medicare payments had been suspended. His wife had left him. He was living out of his car, the saint now a ghost of a man haunted by debt and the fear of a prison cell. He called Joyce. He pleaded, I have a family. Joyce, don't you care what happens to me? Joyce Brannon, the woman of faith, gave him the only answer she could. You should have thought about that before you did this. Ronald, this is wrong. It was her death warrant. Chapter 6, Silence in the Basement. Sunday, January 27th, 2002. The church was quiet after the morning service. Joyce Brannon sat in her basement apartment, perhaps reading a book or preparing for her grand jury testimony scheduled for the following Monday. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't hear the footsteps of the man who knew the layout of the church as well as she did. She was found in a sitting position, facing the window. She had been shot 6 times with a .22 caliber revolver. One shot was point blank to the head. There was no struggle, no robbery, just a cold, calculated execution to silence a voice that refused to lie. The routine white-collar case had just turned into a murder investigation. Book 3, The Harvest of Lies. Chapter 7, The Dust Settles in Phoenix. Back in Arizona, the mirage had finally evaporated. In August 1999, the state forced the Baptist Foundation to stop selling investments. 3 months later, it collapsed into the largest nonprofit bankruptcy in U.S. history. Nearly $600 million was gone. Bill Anderson sat in his garage, the same garage where he had once felt so secure. He was 80 now. He had suffered to heart attacks in the wake of the collapse. He was working as a handyman, carving wooden ornaments to sell for grocery money. Pat was working as a caretaker for people younger than herself. How could they use the church? Bill, she asked one evening, her voice trembling. How could they use God to steal our lives? Bill didn't have an answer. He just kept carving. In 2005, Bill Kratz and Tom Grabinski finally stood trial. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like elderly businessmen, slightly confused by the fuss. Their defense was audacious. If the state hadn't shut us down, the real estate market would have recovered, and everyone would have been paid. The state killed the foundation, not us. The jury wasn't buying it. Kratz was sentenced to 8 years, Grabinski to 6. But for the 11,000 investors, the justice was a cold comfort. They recovered about 70 cents on the dollar, mostly thanks to a settlement from Arthur Anderson, the firm that had turned a blind eye for so long. The money was partially returned, but the faith was gone forever. Chapter 8, The Smoking Gun. In Chicago, the feds were working on a different kind of puzzle. They had the fraud, the paperwork was undeniable, but they needed to tie Maikos to the trigger. They found his storage locker. Inside was a cache of weapons, but not the .22. Then they found the note in his car. a handwritten schedule of the Sunday services at Joyce Brannon's church. They found the shell casing, a .22 caliber, matching the bullets in Joyce's body. They found the box of ammunition partially used. And finally, they found the timeline. 3 days before the murder, Michaels had retrieved his confiscated guns, including a .22 revolver from the Skokie Police Department after renewing his license. On May 5, 2005, Dr. Ronald Michaels was convicted of health care fraud and the murder of Joyce Brannon. The healer was sentenced to death. Epilogue: The Cost of the Truth. The stories of the desert and the city converge in a single painful truth. Greed is a predatory animal. It finds the places where we are most vulnerable, our faith in God, our trust in our doctors, and it builds its nest there. Bill Anderson passed away with a heart heavy from the betrayal of his church. Joyce Brannon died because she believed that the truth was worth more than her life. In the end, the Baptist Foundation of Arizona and Dr. Ronald Michaels left behind a legacy of ruin, but they also left behind a reminder that even in the shadow of the most righteous institutions, one must watch the hands of the men in charge. For when they say they are doing God's work, they might just be building an altar to themselves. The end. The altar of greed. A novelization of faith, fraud, and fatal betrayal. Prologue: The Mirage of Righteousness. The Arizona sun was a relentless judge, baking the Phoenix asphalt until the horizon shimmered with the heat of 1,000 unsaid prayers. In this desert, water was life, but faith was the currency. For the thousands who gathered under the steeples of the Southern Baptist Church, the world was simple. There was the path of the righteous, and there was the wilderness. Bill Kratz understood this better than anyone. He didn't just walk the path, he paved it with gold, or at least the promise of it. To the elderly couples in the pews, Bill was more than an attorney. He was a financial Moses, leading them to a land of milk, honey, and 10% interest rates. They called it stewardship. It was a holy word, a word that bridged the gap between the kingdom of God and the security of a retirement account. But beneath the polished mahogany of the Baptist Foundation of Arizona's headquarters, a different kind of ritual was taking place. It wasn't a prayer meeting. It was a funeral for the truth. Part I, the foundation of sand. Chapter 1, the shepherd and his flock. Bill Anderson sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the Superstition Mountains in hues of bruised purple and gold. Beside him, his wife Pat gripped his hand. Her grip was a little tighter these days, a lingering reflex from the terror of the brain aneurysm that had nearly taken her 3 years prior. We're safe now, Bill, she whispered. The Lord provided. Bill nodded. He was a retired plant manager, a man who measured his life in honest sweat and mechanical precision. He had spent 40 years making things work. Now, in the twilight of his life, he wanted things to stay working. They had invested everything, $200,000 into the Baptist Foundation of Arizona BFA. It wasn't just a bank. It was an extension of their baptism. The brochures spoke of low-income housing, of feeding the hungry, of building the kingdom, and the interest, 10%. While the world offered 6%, the BFA offered the blessings of a higher power. Its wise stewardship, the salesman had told them. He was a young man with a Bible in one hand and a ledger in the other. He spoke in verses and smiled with the practiced warmth of a grandson. You're not just saving for yourselves. You're investing in the gospel. How could they refuse? To doubt the BFA was to doubt the church. To doubt Bill Kratz was to doubt the very man who walked into their congregations like a modern-day apostle. Across town, Robert Shaw was fighting a different kind of desert. A former car salesman, Robert had spent his 30s in a haze of bourbon and regret. He had found the bottom of many bottles before he found the doors of the Southern Baptist Church. I was a wreck, Robert would later tell anyone who asked. The drink had its teeth in me, but the church, they took me in. They made my life easy again. For Robert, the BFA was his penance and his peace. He put $250,000 into the fund. every penny he'd earned from every car he'd ever sold. He even set aside $60,000 for his daughter's education. He saw it as a fortress. He didn't know that the fortress was built on a sinkhole. Chapter 2: The Architect of Shadows. William Kratz was a man of impeccable tailoring and even more impeccable timing. At 34, he had taken the reins of a modest nonprofit and transformed it into a magnificent money machine for God. He sat in his posh Phoenix office, surrounded by the trappings of success that were meant to reflect the glory of the Creator. To Kratz, there was no conflict between a high-rise office and a humble heart. In his mind, he was doing the Lord's work on a grand scale. He saw the burgeoning real estate market of the 1980s as a divine gift. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, he would quote, but the titles are held in escrow. But the Arizona real estate bubble didn't care about theology. When it burst in the early 90s, the BFAS assets didn't just decline, they evaporated. Raw land that was supposed to be worth millions became worthless scrub. Commercial properties stood empty, ghosts in the heat. A normal man would have admitted defeat. A righteous man would have confessed. But Bill Kratz was an ambitious man. He couldn't let the Pope of the Southern Baptists be seen as a failure. He created Allo. Allo was the bad bank, a shadowy off-book entity where Kratz buried the corpses of his bad investments. It was a circular flow of money. The BFA would sell worthless land to Allo at inflated prices. Allo would pay for it with notes I owe us that were essentially paper promises backed by nothing. On the BFAS books, it looked like a profit. On the reality of the balance sheet, it was a cancer. As the dead grew, the lies had to grow. More investors were needed. The salesmen were sent back out. Their pitches more urgent. Their use of the word stewardship more frequent. They were fishing for souls, but they were catching life savings. Chapter 3: The Preacher's Son. Kyle Tresh arrived in Phoenix with a law degree and a heart full of idealism. The son of a preacher from Tulsa, Kyle wanted his career to mean something. Working for the BFA seemed like the ultimate synthesis of his skills and his soul. The morale was infectious. Kyle remembered. It felt like we were the good guys. But as he dug into the contracts, the legal language began to smell like rot. He saw the names. Alo, Benefactor B, the complex webs of subsidiaries. He saw the money moving in circles, never leaving the house, just changing clothes. In April 1996, Kyle couldn't stay silent. He sat across from Bill Kratz and Tom Grabinski, the in-house counsel. This isn't a strategy, Bill, Kyle said, his voice trembling but firm. It's a deception. You're telling people we're profitable when we're hemorrhaging. Alo is a ghost. Kratz didn't flinch. He leaned back, his eyes calm, almost pitying. You lack vision. Kyle, these are long-term assets. They need time to mature. This is a workout situation, not a fraud. We're keeping the balls in the air until the market returns. You're using new money to pay old debt, Kyle countered. That has a name. It's called faith. Grabinski snapped. Kyle Tresh walked out and handed in his resignation. He wrote a letter accusing them of fraud. But the BFA machine was too big. Kratz sent a letter to the investors dismissing the rumors as attacks from Satan, and the faithful believed him. They ignored the news. They prayed for Bill Kratz. They kept their money in the furnace. Chapter 4, The Collapse. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, agonizing crumble. Terry Green Sterling, an investigative reporter for the Phoenix New Times, spent 6 months following the breadcrumbs. When her series hit the stands in 1998, the mirage finally began to flicker. They were tanking, Sterling said, and they were singing hymns while they did it. In August 1999, the state of Arizona stepped in. They didn't come with Bibles. They came with cease and desist orders. The BFA was forced to stop selling. Without new investors, the Ponzi scheme gasped its last breath. 3 months later, the bankruptcy filings were made. $600 million. That was the hole in the ground where the investors' dreams used to be. For Bill Anderson, the news came like a physical blow. He was 70 years old. He went out to his garage and stayed there for hours, his hands shaking as he carved patriotic lawn ornaments to sell for grocery money. I couldn't sleep, Bill said. I felt like I'd failed Pat. I felt like I'd failed God. 2 weeks later, Bill's heart gave out. Then it happened again. To heart attacks in 14 days. The stress of losing $200,000 was literally tearing his chest apart. Robert Shaw had to tell his daughter that her college fund was gone. He had to sell the house he'd worked so hard to keep. At an age when he should have been playing golf, Robert was washing cars at a rental agency, his hands chapped from the soap and the cold water, his heart heavy with a betrayal that no prayer could fix. I didn't tell my wife for 2 weeks, Robert whispered. I was too embarrassed. I trusted the Baptist, and the Baptist had robbed me blind. Part 2, The Doctor's Shadow. Chapter 5, The Angel of the Sick. Chicago is a city of neighborhoods and secrets. In the quiet streets, where the elderly lived in brick bungalows, Dr. Ronald Michaels was a legend. He was the podiatrist who still made house calls. Would you like a cup of tea, doctor? His patients would ask. They were women in their 80s, men who had fought in wars and worked in steel mills. They saw him as a friend. Dr. Michaels was charming. He had a sterling bedside manner and a way of making the lonely feel seen. He would sit at their kitchen tables, eat their cookies, and listen to their stories about grandchildren who never called. Then he would bill Medicare for surgeries he never performed. It was a brilliant, cruel efficiency. His patients were old, sick, and often suffered from dementia. They wouldn't remember if he'd performed a complex foot surgery or just clipped their toenails. To them, it was all the doctor's work. In 1 year alone, Ronald Michaels made over $400,000. He was the highest paid podiatrist in Illinois. Over 7 years, he took Medicare for $1.7 million. But greed is a hungry god. Chapter 6, The Spiral. Beneath the charisma, Ronald Michaels was a man in freefall. A messy divorce had stripped him of his stability. He had a persistent prescription drug problem that blurred the edges of his morality. He was drinking heavily. His cash flow, once a river, was being diverted by investigators. Pete Tyler, a Medicare investigator, had noticed the red flags. One patient had 350 surgeries. Tyler had asked, staring at the screen, "That's not a foot anymore. That's a science project." When Tyler suspended the payments, Michaels didn't panic. He grew desperate. He started writing scripts for his patients. "Tell them I made tiny incisions," he coached them. "Tell them you're satisfied. Tell them I'm a good man." Many of them complied. They loved him. They signed affidavits swearing to miracles that never happened. But one woman wouldn't sign. Chapter 7, The Star Witness. Joyce Brannon was 54 years old, a former ICU nurse who had seen enough of life to know when someone was selling her a lie. She lived in the basement of the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church, where she served as the caretaker. She was a woman of truth. When the FBI agents visited her in September 2001, Joyce didn't hesitate. She looked at the billing record 70 surgeries on her own feet. "Honey," she said to Agent Renee Reyes, "I'm a nurse. I know what a surgery looks like. He never touched me with a scalpel." Joyce became the centerpiece of the government's case. She was the star witness who couldn't be intimidated. Michaels called her. He pleaded. He cried. "I have a family. Joyce, don't you care what happens to me? You should have thought about that before you did this." "Ronald," she told him, "this is wrong." It was a sentence of death, though she didn't know it yet. Chapter 8, Silence in the Sanctuary. On a Sunday evening, after the hymns had faded and the pews were empty, Joyce Brannon was in her basement apartment. She was sitting in a chair, perhaps looking out the window at the Chicago twilight. She never heard him coming. The killer was methodical. He knew the layout of the church. He knew where Joyce lived. He walked up behind her and fired 6 shots from a .22 caliber revolver. One was at point-blank range. When the news reached Assistant U.S. Attorney Sean Berkowitz the next morning, the room went cold. She was supposed to testify in 3 days. Berkowitz said, "We didn't just lose a witness. We lost a hero." Chapter 9, The Palm Pilot and the Shell Casing. The investigation into Dr. Ronald Michaels shifted from white-collar fraud to cold-blooded murder. Michaels was living in his car. He had lost his house, his dog, his dignity. He was a shell of a man, fueled by alcohol and a desperate need to survive at any cost. The feds searched his car. They found a box of .22 caliber ammunition. They found a shell casing that matched the one found in the church basement. And then they found his Palm Pilot. It was a digital diary of a stalker. He had recorded every agent who visited his patients. He had rated the interviews. He had noted the Sunday service times for the Bethany Evangelical Lutheran Church. He had planned the murder with the same clinical precision he used to fabricate his surgical bills. Epilogue: The Cost of Coins. In September 2005, the two worlds of Arizona and Chicago converged in the halls of justice. Bill Kratz and Tom Grabinski were found guilty. Kratz was sentenced to 8 years, Grabinski to 6. They maintained their innocence to the end, claiming that if they hadn't been shut down, everyone would have been made whole. They were still selling the mirage from a prison cell. The investors got back 70 cents on the dollar, thanks to a settlement with Arthur Anderson. But the 30 cents they lost wasn't just money. It was the years of extra work, the heart attacks, the lost faith. I won't go back to a Baptist church, Katie Moss said, her voice thin. They used the word of God to steal my life. In Chicago, Dr. Ronald Michaels received a different kind of sentence. For the fraud, 6 years. For the murder of Joyce Brannon, death. He sits now in a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, waiting for a finality that he once forced upon a woman in a church basement. Joyce Brannon died for the truth. Bill Anderson lived for it. And Bill Kratz, he's still waiting for the real estate market to turn around in his dreams. The desert heat remains. the steeples still rise toward the sky, and the line between faith and fraud remains as thin as a 10% promise. The end. The alchemy of ink. The rise and fall of the H to H38 Empire. A novel based on the true account of Albert Talton. Prologue, The Specimen Vault. In the heart of Washington, D.C., there is a room that does not exist on any public map of the city. It is a place where history is measured in cotton, linen, and the scent of chemical ink. They call it the Specimen Vault. Behind several layers of biometric security and armed guards, the walls are lined with floor-to-ceiling steel drawers, each containing the shattered dreams of thousands of men who thought they could outsmart the United States Treasury. Kelly Harris, a forensic expert with eyes sharpened by decades of looking at things most people ignore, pulled open a heavy drawer. The air inside the room was climate-controlled, preserving the evidence of a century of greed. Inside lay a $100 bill, pinned to a velvet backing. To the untrained eye, it was Benjamin Franklin staring back with his usual stoic wisdom. But to Kelly, it was a ghost. This one was different. She whispered, her voice echoing against the sterile walls. In the long history of counterfeiting, a crime as old as the nation itself, most forgeries were the work of master engravers or desperate men with offset presses that weighed tons. But this bill, part of the notorious H to H38 strain, was the product of a quiet revolution. It wasn't born in a high-tech lab or a foreign basement. It was born in a townhouse in Lawndale, California, birthed by a man who saw the American dream not as a goal to be earned, but as a code to be hacked. This is the story of Albert Talton, a man who turned hairspray into gold and newsprint into an empire, only to watch it all burn under the relentless gaze of the law. Chapter 1, The Engineer of Inglewood. Albert Talton was never a man of small ambitions. Growing up in Inglewood, California, in the late 70s and 80s, the air was often thick with the scent of jet fuel from wax, and the underlying tension of a neighborhood were making it usually meant surviving until Friday. Inglewood was a place of deep contrast tree-lined streets with well-kept lawns shadowed by the reputation of Inglewood. Always up to no good. Albert was the outlier. While the other kids were looking for trouble on the street corners or joining the burgeoning gang culture of Los Angeles, Albert was in his garage, surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and the smell of solder. He had the hands of a surgeon and the mind of an electrical engineer. He didn't just play music. He wanted to understand why the bass from a Bose speaker felt like a physical heartbeat against the chest. One afternoon, his friend David Goldberg watched in awe as Albert disassembled a high-end Bose radio he had acquired. "What are you doing?" "Al, that's a $300 system," Goldberg said, leaning against the cluttered workbench. Albert didn't look up. His soldering iron hissed against a circuit board, a small plume of blue smoke rising into the air. "They're charging for the name." "Dave, I want to see the math. I want to know how they get that much air to move in such a small box. It's an acoustic waveguide. It's just geometry and physics. If I can replicate the geometry, I can replicate the sound." Within a week, Albert hadn't just fixed the speaker, he had replicated its internal waveguide using scrap plastic, wood, and his own calculations. He built a car stereo system from scratch that hit harder and cleaner than anything sold in a showroom. It was his first taste of the copycat high, the realization that with enough patience and attention to detail, the world's most expensive secrets were just puzzles waiting to be solved. But the legitimate path was slow and frustrating. After high school, Albert enrolled in electrical engineering courses, but the academic pace felt like a crawl. College was a grind of theories, debt, and professors who didn't understand his practical genius. He dropped out, his brilliance untethered from a degree. He began doing dirt, the local slang for the hustle. He realized that the same mind that could decode a Bose speaker could decode a financial document. He forged checks, a crime that landed him in a cell in the 90s. He committed bank fraud in 2001. Each time he went away, He didn't learn to stop. He learned how not to get caught next time. By 2004, Albert Talton was 41 years old, a two-time felon working at a body shop. He was a man with a Ferrari brain stuck in a Hyundai life, sanding down fenders and mixing paint for customers who didn't know his name. Then came the spark. His boss at the body shop walked into the small, dusty office one morning, holding a $100 bill between two fingers as if it were a dead moth. "Look at this piece of junk," the boss grumbled, tossing it onto the desk. Some kid tried to pass it at the register, fake as a $3 bill. "I'm out $100 because I didn't look close enough." Albert picked up the note. He felt the texture. He looked at the blurred lines of the Treasury seal. He didn't see a crime. He saw a challenge. He saw a poorly executed puzzle. "I could do this better," Albert said, his voice flat and certain. The boss laughed, a harsh, nicotine-stained sound. "Sure you could, Al. Everyone's an expert. Get back to the fenders. We have a Mercedes coming in for a hood job." But Albert didn't go back to the fenders. That afternoon, the engineer of Inglewood died, and the alchemist was born. Chapter 2, The Kitchen Laboratory. The startup cost of the greatest digital counterfeiting operation in American history was less than $200. Al